Welcome to the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast. I'm the sports editor of the Herald Democrat, Jason De La Rosa, and you're listening to the latest edition of the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast. We are about to enter Week 10, and things have heated up. We have teams that have clinched playoff spots. We have teams still clinching playoff spots. And unfortunately, we have teams that have been eliminated from earning playoff spots. But that's the way it goes in high school football. We get down to these last couple weeks, and we get to really see how things are taking shape. Last week, Week 9, was a big week. We talked about it, how big it was going to be. People could clinch those spots, and just about everybody that could did. And we'll talk about that, what they have coming up this week, and how that shapes up the last 2 weeks of the high school football regular season here on the podcast. And as always, this season, the podcast is brought to you by Frontier Golf Carts Texoma. Experience the thrill of savings to celebrate their new Denison location, proudly serving the greater Texoma area, where they're launching with the lowest prices of the year. This marks an exciting new chapter in the 11-year history of Frontier Golf Carts as they expand from their original location in Salina. For their grand opening, come see the awesome collection of new carts with up to $1,500 off, including the 2024 Frontier EV Lightning F4 with all seats facing forward. New lithium battery-powered golf carts with backup cameras and touchscreen entertainment start at $7,495. Visit frontiergolfcarts.com or check out their Facebook page for the latest specials. And if you would like to sponsor the podcast along with Frontier Golf Carts, contact Renee Marler at rmarler@cherryroad.com. We've got podcasts coming through the end of November, probably into December like we have the last several years. We do a podcast every week until the playoffs are over for our teams here in Texoma. So again, if you want to be a sponsor either this year or next year, because we do it starting back in August, we'll kick it off again with another season, contact Renee at rmarler@cherryroad.com. So you know how we do it here on the podcast. We don't change the format. We do it every week. We start at the top. We work our way down to the bottom. We talk about all the games coming up on Friday, or in this case, Thursday night as well. We'll recap that team's game from the prior week, and we'll talk about teams. We still have teams on byes. We've got a little bit of everything every week here, thanks to our Texoma teams. But we'll start at the top with the game in 5A, and that, of course, is the Sherman Bearcats in District 5-5A Division I action. They are the game that's on Thursday. They are playing on Halloween, and they're hoping it's a scary trip up north for Frisco Wakeland. Again, at Bearcat Stadium, 7 o'clock on Thursday night. Wakeland comes in at 6-3 and 5-2 after they won last week in a crazy game, 65-59 in overtime against Frisco Lone Star, and Sherman is coming off its bye. So they've had 2 weeks to prepare, and they are 2-6 on the season, 1-5 in district play. Unfortunately for the Bearcats, while they were taking the bye last week, the results did not go in their favor, particularly this one against Wakeland, and that has them eliminated from being in contention for the playoffs. With these 2 games remaining, they have Wakeland this week, and then they go to Lebanon Trail next Thursday. So keep that in mind if you're gonna watch their final game of the season. That's also going to be on a Thursday night, and they were hoping that things would go their way, so that way they could potentially get back in the mix, win their last 2 games, maybe have some sort of crazy tiebreaker. But unfortunately, that didn't happen, and part of the reason that didn't happen was that Wakeland win over Lone Star. Lone Star was undefeated, the number 2 team in the state. Obviously, that's who Sherman had played the last time out before going into their bye. And instead of hanging back in the pack, they have made themselves the clear favorite for the number 3 slot right now, which could be the number 2 seed because Lone Star and Reedy have to play. And if Lone Star loses that one and they end up tied with Wakeland, Wakeland has the tiebreaker. So that was a huge, huge win for Wakeland to stay in the mix, not just for a playoff spot, but now for one of the top seeds in the district. and they won it. I'm sure if you're into high school football, you're into Texas high school football, you've seen the clip of how Wakeland won that game in overtime. Lone Star was about to score, whether on a touchdown or potentially a field goal on their possession in overtime, and QB keeper up the middle, defender comes out of the pile with the ball near the end zone, reverses course, goes down the sideline, and that's how they score on a 100-yard fumble return to win the game. And so that changed things in this district in a big way. McKinney North is now in fourth at 4-2. Frisco sitting at 3-3, still has a chance, and so does Lebanon Trail, pending their outcome this week. That game against Sherman next week may be a must-win for Lebanon Trail, pending the outcomes this week. So unfortunately, Sherman not in the mix. You look at it this way: they have finished well the last couple of seasons, despite having been eliminated. There was a couple seasons ago they beat a team in the second to last game that needed to win, that was in the mix for the playoffs. So Sherman has shown that they can finish well despite not having anything to play for, except for pride, except for the fact that this is the last home game. And talking about next week, even if it doesn't mean anything for Lebanon Trail, again, Sherman has shown the last week of the season that they are going to fight to the end, that they're going to try to get a win. That's something they've done the last couple of years and had success going into the offseason. So, again, it's a big game for Wakeland. If Wakeland wins, they do clinch a playoff spot. So, obviously, the only question would be, can you catch them off guard because of the win last week? Because they went and did something unexpected. Everybody's been praising them for this amazing win in a crazy way. And then you've got to come up here on a short week against a team that is near the bottom of the standings, that Wakeland knows is at the bottom of the standings. And so will they come out flat? Will they think they can just show up? And Sherman has played well to start against the teams in this district. Unfortunately, there's been either that stretch right before halftime or in the second half where the game gets away from them. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Again, on Thursday night, 7 o'clock, it's the last home game for Sherman, hosting Wakeland in District 5A Division 1 action. Moving to the Denison Yellow Jackets in District 4-5A Division 2. This is a 7:30 game. Denison is traveling to Lovejoy. And again, a similar situation to Sherman. Unfortunately, Denison last week being eliminated from the playoff race, and so they're in the mode of spoiler for these last couple of games. They are 2-6 overall and 2-4 in district play after losing to Anna 28-15. Lovejoy is coming off a loss as well. They were beaten by Prosper Walnut Grove 41-37, and Lovejoy is now 5-3 overall and 5-1 in district play. And so this district was nuts last week, and it's turned into a real mess. And unfortunately, Denison couldn't stay in the mess. If they would have beaten Anna, they could have stayed in the race for at least another week. But unfortunately, they are sitting in 6th place, and even if they were to win out, they're going to lose some tiebreakers, and other people have games that are going to keep Denison from catching them, because Lovejoy and Walnut Grove are both 5-1, and Melissa and Anna are both 4-2, and Frisco Emerson is at 4-3. So unfortunately for Denison, they're going to lose all the tiebreakers against the people in front of them, and so that kept them will keep them out of the playoffs this year. It also gives them their first losing season since 2016. But it was a hard-fought game on Friday night at Munson Stadium against Anna, against a team that knew it had to keep pace in what has been a topsy-turvy topsy-turvy race to get a playoff spot. Nobody has clinched a playoff spot yet going into these final two games. So Anna knew that most of the other teams around them have beaten Denison. You don't want to have that be the game that keeps you out because you weren't able to be the team that everybody else was. And Denison was in it. It was 7-6 after the first quarter. It's 14-9 at halftime, and the Jackets were hanging around. We talked coming in about how good Anna was offensively. They were averaging 50 points a game. They had scored at least 44 points in every game except their game against Melissa when they were held to 18, and Denison held them to 28. Anna literally scored a touchdown in every single quarter to get there, but their yardage was down. Obviously, the point they scored, almost 3 touchdowns a game fewer than they did. Denison forced 3 turnovers, got a pair of interceptions by Bryce McQueen and Roman Henderson, and a fumble recovery by Shannon Love, and they were able to hang around. And unfortunately, in the second half, they weren't able to match the third quarter touchdown that kind of widened the gap, made it 21-9, and Denison was only able to score on the final play of the game to make it as close as it was. But again, it was what you would have hoped for in a matchup between two teams that were still in the mix. That it didn't turn the way some of their previous losses had gone. Jalen Butler led the way on the ground for Denison. 27 carries for 214 yards. He also had 3 catches for 38 yards and a touchdown. Ty Rhodes, 17 carries for 67 yards and a touchdown. He was 7 of 17 passing, 91 yards with a touchdown and an interception. And Brendan Douglas chipped in 2 catches for 27 yards. And obviously, this is a tougher task. We talked about all the way back at the start of the season. If you looked at Denison's schedule, the last 3 games, if they could win enough along the way, were going to be it was the inflection point of could Denison get into the playoffs, because they were probably going to play the top teams, the teams that consider themselves playoff contenders. And again, you're playing a team. You just played a team that's now tied for third. You're playing a team that's tied for first, and you end against the team that is currently tied for third. So it's a tough road to finish with. The history with Lovejoy has not been very good since they started playing. They've been in district for a while now. Lovejoy's never lost to Denison. They're 10-0. The last 3 or 4 meetings have not been close. And again, you have a Lovejoy team that's not going to be in a good mood coming off the loss to Walnut Grove. If Lovejoy had won last week, they would have clinched a playoff spot. They would have essentially wrapped up the district title, because everybody else would have had 2 losses, and all Lovejoy would have had to do is win one of their last 2 to clinch the top seed and clinch the district title. Now Lovejoy has to win this week to clinch a playoff spot and to have a chance at the top seed, because now they're going to lose it if Walnut Grove stays tied with them because of the head-to-head. So it wasn't going to be easy regardless, but I think obviously you do not want an unhappy Lovejoy and being at their house as well to deal with them. So it's going to be tough the last 2 weeks, but I think the one thing that Denison showed last week was, even though you're playing a team that's ahead of you in the standings and has these D1 talents and has a better record than you, that they're going to put up a fight, that they're going to be in the mix. And I think a lot of people may have seen that Anna Denison score and said, "Oh, that's interesting that Anna wasn't able to blow out the Jackets like they had some of these other teams in district already." That it was that close of a game for 2.5, 3 quarters. So that's the task. And like I said, if something crazy happens in this district, it wouldn't surprise me, because we've had a lot of crazy things happen so far through 9 weeks. Why wouldn't we make the 10th and the 11th week any less crazy than it's been the last couple? So that's Denison going to Lovejoy for District 4-5A Division II game. And again, that's a 7:30 start on Friday instead of the normal 7 o'clock starts. Don't ask me why that they changed it this week. It doesn't make sense to me, but it is what it is. And so that'll be a little later start time, getting down to the outskirts of the Metroplex to go watch that game on Friday night. Moving down to 4A and seeing what Van Alstyne is up to in District 5-4A Division II. And the Panthers took care of business last week. They survived, and in another, for the second time in 3 weeks, having to be pushed but they find a way to get the job done. 42-35 against Farmersville. So they are 5-3 overall and 4-0 in district play. And they are hosting Bonham at 7 o'clock on Friday. Bonham is 1-7 overall and 0-4 in district play after losing 43-10 against Cattle Mills. So obviously, not only does Van Alstyne gain sole possession of first place, which was on the line, the winner of Van Alstyne Farmersville was going to be alone atop the district standings. Not only is that taken care of, and Van Alstyne controls its own destiny in terms of trying to win the district title and getting the top seed for the playoffs. Van Alstyne at least clinched a playoff spot, and that's a good thing in this district because somebody's going to get left out in, again, a tight race between 5 teams for 4 spots. Yes, Van Alstyne's 4-0, they're above the fray. Farmersville's at 3-1, alone in second place. Cattle Mills is currently third, they're 3-2, but Sanger and Crum are both hanging out at 2-2, and so it's going to come down to these last couple weeks to determine who gets in and who can avoid tiebreakers or who needs a tiebreaker to go their way. Van Alstyne doesn't have to worry about that. They are in the playoffs no matter what. If they win one more game, whether it's this week or next week, they get the top seed and they get at least a share of the district title. And obviously, if they have a chance to win out and they can take care of it that way. They do have Cattle Mills to end with, and that may be a big game for Cattle Mills, depending on how things shake out this week. Cattle Mills may need that to get into the playoffs. They may already have clinched. And like I said, Van Alstyne may have already clinched the top seed. But they put themselves in a great position. And again, they found a way to win a shootout, a back and forth game that at halftime didn't look like it was going to get this far. It was 14-14. Each team scored in the first and second quarters, and I think everybody's kind of thinking, the high scoring game that we thought was coming was not. And then Farmersville scores twice in the third quarter. Van Alstyne only gets one, and then they flip that to get to 35 all after regulation. Van Alstyne has to score the last touchdown to force overtime. And again, in overtime, Brady Carson comes through with a touchdown on a keeper, as Van Alstyne got the ball first this time compared to their game against Sanger, where that went overtime, and they had the ball second, so they knew what they had to do. They go out and score. They're able to hold Farmersville. They get a sack on fourth down. They're able to win the game 42-35 and get everything accomplished that they could that last week, considering what was at stake with Farmersville. So Brady Carson, 28 carries for 226 yards and 3 touchdowns. He also threw for 157 yards and a touchdown. That was to Tim Moore, who had 5 catches for 98 yards. Castor Fonseca, a catch for 35 yards, and Michael Upchurch, 10 carries, 61 yards, and 2 touchdowns. It was another thrilling game, and again, we've seen that with Van Alstyne. They sort of are living on the edge. They've had the close games, but again, I think at this point, it's one of those things where you play enough of them and you have the success every time. You just have that confidence. We're gonna make a play. We're gonna make a stop. We're gonna do something on special teams. They've done that, since district started, in enough ways to hold first place by themselves. And they're in a position. All they've got to do is take a win one of these last 2 games. You would like to think you're in a good position this week. And again, we've already talked about it with a couple of the teams already. You have a team that's coming off a big win. You're at home, and you're facing a team that's already out of the mix. You're facing a team that is coming in with a bad record. Don't let down. Don't be flat. Don't take it for granted just because you did. This is the proverbial trap game. You had a big game last week. You have Cattle Mills the week after. That's going to be a huge game, depending on what that means for Cattle Mills. You don't want to look ahead. You don't want to come off this win and be flat and think, we're just going to show up and win. Put this game away. And like I said, if you do that, you clinch the top seed. no matter what happens around the district this week or next week. And so I'm sure that's the message that Coach Miller's saying. Let's just get this done. We don't want it to go to the last week, because then we're looking at potential tie, three-way ties and whatever. Just get it done, get it taken care of this week. So Van Alstyne's in a really good spot, hosting Bonham, 7 o'clock on Friday in District 5-4A, Division II action. Another team that clinched a playoff spot was the Pottsboro Cardinals as we head down to 3A. They have a bye this week, so we'll talk about them first just to kind of get their recap out of the way since they don't have a game to talk about. So Pottsboro had an interesting game because they got a little bit of a tussle from Pilot Point, and Pottsboro was able to hold on 48-40 to win this game, where each team scored 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. It was a wild fourth quarter. It was a close game before that, but it was very back and forth, and Pottsboro was able to hang on again to clinch a playoff spot. That was the only thing that they could really accomplish this last week. So they're 8-1 on the season. They're 4-1 in district play. They're still wedged between Palmer and Whitesboro for right now, and obviously we know that Palmer's still in that good position. Doesn't look like they're going to drop a district game, and we have Pottsboro, Whitesboro next week. It's going to be at Pottsboro, and that's obviously looking like that's going to decide who's the second place team and who's the third place team, pending the Whitesboro Pilot Point game that we'll be talking about here in a second. And so Pottsboro goes on the road, has the situation. Like I said, they're able to hang on. Carson Nix, 13 carries for 144 yards and 2 touchdowns. Caden Humphrey, 23 carries for 128 yards. He had 4 touchdown runs. He was also 10 of 11 passing for 144 yards. Xavier Brady, again, leading Pottsboro in receiving, 6 catches for 98 yards. Carson Butcher returned a kickoff, 51 yards for a touchdown, and Pottsboro was able to survive. Pilot Point is better. They've gotten better. We talked about, early in the district or coming into the season, because they played local teams that they had the long losing streak. They have found a way in this district. They're probably going to make the playoffs. It's going to come down to their game against the Life Oak Cliff to decide that. But they've gotten better each week, and obviously they were able to control the ball a lot in this game. They had 50 carries for 315 yards. They only threw it 9 times, only had 1 turnover, and so that's a bit of a concern if you're Pottsboro, is that the defense has maybe shown some things to some people. Obviously the Palmer game, this game, you don't know what the Whitesboro game is going to look like when we get there next week, but that would be the only thing that would concern me. Obviously the offense has been really good all season long, and they continued that in this game to rush for almost 300 yards, have a quarterback only miss on 1 throw to have that incompletion. So Pottsboro just kind of hanging out. Again, they're going to host Whitesboro to end the regular season, and regardless of what happens with Whitesboro this week, Pottsboro has a chance to control its destiny for the second seed. If Whitesboro is able to win, then the winner would be the second seed, and the loser is going to be the third seed. So that's where Pottsboro sits as they kind of sit aside, see what happens in 6-3A Division I action. And the reason they're very interested, obviously, is the Whitesboro game as they host Pilot Point. Whitesboro put up a big number on Dallas A+ Academy. Unfortunately, a lot of people are doing that against Dallas A+ Academy. They won 71-0. They, for the second time in a month, they set the school record for points. They had previously done that against Life Oak Cliff when they won 70-22 back at the beginning of the month, and they surpassed that by a point, winning 71-0 against A+ Academy. So they are 5-3 and 3-1 in district play, and Pilot Point, like we said, coming off that loss against Pottsboro, 2-6 overall, 2-2 in district play, and they are in a situation where they can't clinch outright. They need to win, but they also need Life Oak Cliff to lose to A Plus Academy, which is not going to happen. So Pilot Point, Life Oak Cliff to end the season is probably going to be for the final playoff spot. And Whitesboro, like we said, they can clinch with a victory. That's all they need to do, and they're obviously feeling good about themselves, erasing that bad feeling from a couple weeks ago and losing to Palmer. They took out their frustrations on a winless A Plus Academy team. And again, and this was a game you kind of look at it and you say, well, it was only 8-0 after the first quarter, and so I don't know if anybody at that point said, oh, this is what's going to happen in the game that they're going to get to 70, because it was only 8-0 after the first quarter. So that maybe was a bit of a surprise, but again, taking care of business, and it was one of those games where you have a lot of guys getting involved in the offense because it was such a lopsided score. And that's a good thing at this time of the year too. You don't have to have a lot of guys play a lot of snaps, especially with a key game, or in this case two key games down the stretch. Colt Fagan only was 6 of 7 passing for 163 yards and 2 touchdowns, 4 carries, 27 yards, and also scored. Braden Bomar, 4 catches for 107 yards and a touchdown. Also returned a fumble, 76 yards for a touchdown. Tegan Oakley ran 6 times for 112 yards and a touchdown. Rip Harper had a pair of touchdown runs. Wyatt St. John totaled 57 yards and a touchdown on just 5 carries. Mason Scarborough had a 44-yard touchdown catch. And so a lot of guys in the box score this week, a lot of guys getting some playing time that we haven't necessarily seen yet. And I think that's one of those games that kind of came at the right time, that you could build up some guys to get ready for what's going to end up being potentially 2 of the biggest games of the season, to get you into the playoffs, to get you a better playoff seed, and to get some guys healthy and not give them a lot of wear and tear because the score got out of hand in the third quarter. I think because again at halftime that's only 36-0. I mean, that's not, it wasn't like it was 70-0 at halftime. So that's a good bounce back, like we said, for Whitesboro. And now, like I said, they've got a matchup where they have a team that is going to play as hard as it can to try to put itself in position to win and get a playoff spot the next week. And again, if you're Whitesboro, you can take care of your playoff spot and then focus on a rivalry game against Pottsboro next week. So that's the other matchup in District 3-5A. Excuse me, District 6-3A, Division 1. Whitesboro is hosting Pilot Point, 7:30 on Friday night. We have an all-local matchup this week. That is the only one on the board, and that is the Gunner Tigers going to SNS for District 7. God, I can't talk. District 7-3A Division 2, and this is Gunner coming off the 52-21 win over Blue Ridge, so they are 6-2 on the season and 4-0 in district. And SNS lost 51-0 against Bells. They are 0-8 and 0-4 in district play. So to recap the games last week, SNS did not get off to a good start against Bells. They were down 29-0 after the first quarter, and they finished with around 75 yards of offense. Did again, obviously being shut out. A step back from what we had seen, obviously. Again, they had been playing better. They had been at least moving the ball. They had been showing some signs of life on offense, but Bells was able to jump to that big lead, kind of hold them down. So they're on the verge of ending the season without a win. They do have Callisburg next week to finish. We don't know how Callisburg is going to fit into things, but they're trying to hang on to being in the playoff mix, and so that obviously is going to be their best chance to get a win. Gunner coming into this game, they are coming off the big showdown against Blue Ridge. Both of those teams were undefeated last week in the district standings. The winner was obviously going to have the upper hand to have the top seed, win a district title. Gunner keeps on rolling, and they do what they do. They are now, again, much like Van Alstyne, they now are alone in first place. They are in the playoffs, which is no surprise, but they officially clinched their spot by what they did with this win. And again, a lopsided game with a lot of people contributing. Dylan Tokars, 3 carries, 100 yards, and 2 touchdowns, and also had 4 catches for 43 yards. Brock Body, 15 carries, 91 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Colin Peacock, 3 catches and for 68 yards and a touchdown. Preston Tarpley was 16 of 19 passing, 185 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Ran 5 times for 29 yards, also kicked a 42-yard field goal. Jay Campidi ran 15 times for 76 yards. Easton Overman, 5 carries, 42 yards, also caught a touchdown. Hayden Farrell had a touchdown run. Again, it was another balanced attack, and this was a game early on that Blue Ridge was hanging tough. They scored 2 of their 3 touchdowns in the first quarter. Gunner had to, quote unquote, rally to get it to 24-14 after the first quarter, but then Gunner scored twice in each of the middle 2 periods, and held Blue Ridge off the scoreboard until the fourth quarter to widen the gap. So Gunner's in the position we assume that they would be in. They are in first place. They have clinched a playoff spot. They cannot clinch the top seed unless Leonard loses, and we will talk about them in a second. But in order for them to clinch the top seed this week, they would have to beat SNS, and they would also need Leonard to lose because they finished with Leonard, and so right now Leonard still has a chance to have the tiebreaker there. But so Gunner's going to go on the road to SNS, District 7-3A, Division 2, looking to extend their district winning streak. Again, they haven't lost a district game since 2015, and this is a game that is probably going to add to that list, and we'll see what Gunner can do. If Gunner has to win the last game to clinch the top seed, again, they did everything else that they could do in terms of what could be accomplished against Blue Ridge. And again, give credit to Blue Ridge. They're obviously an improved team that last year Gunner really put it on them. They're sitting at 6-2, and their losses, again, we've said with Blue Ridge, they have as good of 2 losses as anybody might be able to have. They've got losses to state ranked teams, and they're in position obviously to get the 2nd seed right now. They're going to finish with Cowsburg this week and then Howe. So again, as long as they win out, they're going to get the 2nd seed because they've already beaten Leonard. So that's the only team that could potentially catch them, and they already own the tiebreaker over them. So Blue Ridge is in a really good spot to get 2nd place, but Gunner took care of business, like we said, with that 52-21 victory in 7-3A Division 2 action. I don't know if the swing game in this district, the big game in this district this week is Bells going to Leonard. Bells, like we said, beating SNS last week 51-0, so they are 5-4 overall and 3-2 in district play. And Leonard is coming off the bye. They are 6-2 and 3-1. And this is the swing game because right now you have a Leonard team, like we said. Right now they are tied with Blue Ridge for 2nd place, and Bells is sitting in 4th place by themselves. And Bells has the bye to finish the regular season. This is Bells' last game, and they need to, they can win, they can clinch a playoff spot. The winner clinches a playoff spot no matter what. Let me start there. So if you're Leonard, you're playing to get in. If you're Bells, you're playing to get in. If you're Bells and you lose, you can still get in as long as Cowsburg loses to Blue Ridge, which is expected, but again, you can't. You're assuming that, but that's not a guarantee because you have a Cowsburg team that is fighting for its playoff lives. They have to win. If they lose, they're out. So Bells is in a really good spot, but if you're Bells, you're playing to get as good a seed as possible. And in this case, you're looking potentially to get the 3rd seed again, or because if you win, you have the tiebreaker over Leonard. and Leonard still has to play Gunner. So a Bell's loss probably locks them into the 4th seed. So Bells is playing for a much better seed, a much better or easier path in the playoffs, like they have had the last couple years, being the 2nd seed behind Gunner. So that's what Bells is playing. And obviously, this is their last game. They want to go out on a good note. They're gonna have to sit around for 2 weeks going into the playoffs. You don't want to go in off a loss. And they played really well the last week again. Like I said, getting up 29-0 on SNS, being able to do what they do. 36 carries as a team, 419 yards rushing. The one pass they threw ended up being a 25-yard touchdown from Easton Hartline to Caden King. But again, it's all about the ground game with Bells, and that's what they did in this one. Easton Branham, 4 carries for 105 yards. Hartline also, his lone carry was a 52-yard touchdown. Jackson Brown, 4 carries for 41 yards and a touchdown. Bryson Thompson, 4 carries for 38 yards and 2 touchdowns. Braden Richardson, 4 carries for 34 yards and a touchdown. A lot of guys getting some carries in this one as well, with the score turning into what it is. Jace Weegar added a touchdown run early in the 4th quarter to end that scoring. And again, Bells did what they needed to do. They weren't looking ahead. They took care of business against SNS. Now you got to take care of business against Leonard. This game was a semi-shootout last year. Bells did win. They've won 6 straight against Leonard. Leonard's last win in the series was 2013. And obviously Leonard's coming off a bye, so you don't know what that means in terms of their the rust versus rest factor. They like to throw the ball around. They've done it the last couple of years. Have the really good quarterback Jacoby LeCook, and they've got some athletes there. And obviously they know they have Gunner next to end it. And you don't want to put your eggs in that basket that you've got to maybe win that game to get into the playoffs or avoid a tiebreaker. They know they're going to be up for this because they know that they can clinch it and be done with it, and then you don't have to worry about it, and you're taken care of in terms of making the playoffs again. So I think that's obviously the huge factor there. But again, you never know how teams react coming off byes. It may take a little bit, and again, you've got a Bells offense that just plugs and plays and puts guys in, and they do what they do. And so, but it's obviously the biggest game in the district this week, and it's gonna change. No matter who wins, it's gonna change seeding and outcome and potential playoff matchups and all that good stuff. So Bells is gonna have to go and get it, and Leonard's gonna be sitting at home saying, let's go. And so that's where we're at with Bells going to Leonard, 7:30 on Friday in District 7 3A Division II action. The other team in that district, the local team in that district has a bye this week, and that is the Howe Bulldogs. And unfortunately for Howe, they were officially eliminated from contention this past week with their 54-14 loss against Callisburg. Again, we talked about that game being sort of a swing near the bottom of the standings. Guys had to stay in the mix. The winner was going to be on the fringes. And again, this is another game. I don't know what it is about a lot of our teams this year. The first halves are really close. This was a 21-7 game at halftime. It was in the balance. House hanging tough, and then Callisburg explodes for 33 points in the 3rd quarter. They got a punt return for a touchdown. They got an interception return for a touchdown. They got a safety. There was a lot of action there in the 3rd quarter to really break it open. And unfortunately, Howe wasn't able to stay in there. Riken Cross had 6 catches for 117 yards and a touchdown. James Cowart, 9 carries for 69 yards. Rylan Strong, 5 carries for 30 yards and a touchdown. He was also 7 of 16 passing for 129 yards with a touchdown and an interception. And so Howe is going to, like we mentioned, they're going to end their season next week by hosting Blue Ridge. And unfortunately for the Bulldogs, they weren't able to stick in it to the end, thanks to this loss to Callisburg. And it's been a choppy year. They're 3-6 now and 1-4 in district play. Coming into district, you kind of looked at at their road, and you kind of said, well, if they can beat SNS and Callisburg, can they beat somebody else to kind of sneak in there? Obviously, having a new coach, having some injuries down the stretch has really hurt them. Braden Ulmer did come back in this game after missing the last couple, but he only had 9 carries for 10 yards. I don't think he's 100%, but I think that's a senior that wants to play in meaningful games, or a game that meant something for how to stay in the mix, to not end his season on the sideline. So kudos to him to try to give it a go and do as much as he could under the circumstances. But unfortunately, Hal's going to be playing for Pride. That they've got the last home game next week as they sit on their bye in 7-3A Division II this week. Dropping down to 2A, we've got some interesting matchups in 6-2A Division I, and the biggest one there is the one that is at the top of the standings, and that's the Tioga Bulldogs going on the road to face Wolf City. This is 7 o'clock on Friday, and this is for sole possession of first place. And if it wasn't for another game in the area, this might be the game of the week, but this is right up there, because Tioga beat Alvord last week in that battle of district undefeated teams 50-24, and Wolf City stayed unbeaten in district play as they won 70-28 against Whitewright. So Tioga comes into this matchup 6-2 overall and 4-0 in district play. Wolf City also 4-0 in district play, obviously. They are 7-1 on the season, and they do have a common loss. They both lost to Collinsville. Wolf City lost 55-42 a couple weeks ago, right before district play started, and Tioga opened the season with a 40-13 loss against Collinsville. Now, Tioga's played a lot better since then, and they've got a lot of their guys back from injury. So I don't know if you want to compare, the first game of the season where you don't have a lot of scouting and you're just kind of going off what you think a team's going to do, compared to when Wolf City played them. They were able to, get scouting reports and see what might work and what might not work. But it is interesting that both of their losses are to the same. The 2 of the 3 losses between them are to the same opponent. And this is obviously huge. This is the winner of this has the inside track to the district title, the top seed, all that good stuff. The top 3 teams in this district have all clinched playoff spots. Tioga clinched last week with that win against Alvord. Wolf City clinched against Whitewright. So you have those 2 at 4-0. Alvord is still at 4-1, and then we'll talk about Whitewright here in a minute. That Whitewright and Trenton are both at 1-3, fighting for the last playoff spot, with Tom being not far behind at 1-4. But this is a huge game, and like we said, they're gonna the last week was the Tioga Alvord matchup. This week is the Tioga Wolf City matchup, and then next week to finish it is the Wolf City Alvord matchup. So if you're Tioga, you can clinch the top seed for the playoffs if you win, because obviously the Wolf City Alvord game, the loser of that is the 3rd seed, and the winner, even if they tie you, no matter what, you have the tiebreaker. So Tioga can clinch the top seed with a win over Wolf City. If Wolf City wins, then we could be potentially talking about a 3-way tie and then points, because if Alvord were to beat Wolf City, then everybody would have one loss atop the standings. So Tioga can take care of business with that. That's what they did last week against Alvord, knowing what was at stake, because that was a huge game there. And again, a good game through halftime, sitting there at 24-10, and then Tioga's able to pull away in the second half, especially in the fourth quarter. Alvord got it to within, I think it was 13, and then the Bulldogs scored I can't say the Bulldogs because they're both Bulldogs. The Tioga scored the last 2 touchdowns of the game to really put the game away. And they do it like they always do. They love that passing attack. And Rocky Urich, 19 of 32 for 313 yards, had 4 touchdown passes in this one. And Austin Norwood also got in on the action. His lone pass was a 50-yard touchdown to Gage Anderson, who had a very nice game. He scored 3 touchdowns. He had 2 catches for 62 yards. Both of them went for scores. He also had 8 carries for 69 yards and a touchdown. Jonathan Hernandez, 6 carries for 97 yards and a touchdown. Johnny Dorpinghouse, 7 catches, 128 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jake David, 3 catches for 56 yards. Greeley McAden, 3 catches, 55 yards and a touchdown as well. And it set up the showdown. I think maybe a lot of people thought that this was going to be the battle for the district title when the districts come out and you see the schedule and you're like, ooh, that's a tasty game at the end. This is going to be a contrast in styles. This is, like we said, Tioga loves to pass, loves to throw, has a lot of receivers chucking it around the field. Wolf City, we've talked about them a couple times. H.D. Davis, he's their guy, running back. When you look at the stats, he's one of the best in the state, regardless of classification. Had another big game last week against Whitewright. 25 carries, 350 yards. I think it was 5 touchdowns. And he's explosive. He's their guy. They can throw it too, and they're not a one-dimensional team. But obviously, nobody has been able to stop him. I think we talked about it last week or the week before about. I think his worst game is 173 yards. So he's always over 200. He's gone over 300, I think 3 or 4 times now, and he's there. He makes the engine go. So you got to find a way to either slow him. I don't know because nobody stopped him. You got to find a way to slow him down, and you've got to be able to. I mean, this could definitely be a shootout for sure, and obviously it's got the big ramifications of what it means seeding wise. Obviously they're both in the playoffs. Can Tioga find the way to beat another undefeated team and get the job done with a trip to Wolf City, 7 o'clock on Friday in District 6-2A Division I action. I'll talk about Whitewright because to talk about them and Tom Bean kind of simultaneously is sort of the I don't know. I guess we talk about Whitewright first because they're higher in the standings and they've got a more interesting situation with their going on the road. They're going to Nakona at 7 o'clock on Friday. So again, we talked about the loss to Wolf City. So they're sitting at 5-3 overall, 1-3 in district play. Nakona lost 49-0 against Tom Bean. So they are 1-7 and 0-4 in district play. And we've talked about the top of this district is clear cut. We know who the top 3 are. We just don't know how they're going to finish. They could all tie for first place. The bottom 4 in this district is still a bit of all 4 of them are more or less in a race because they're all starting to play each other now after playing the teams at the top. And right now, Whitewright is tied for 4th place with Trenton. They're both 1-3. Tom Bean at 1-4. Nakona is 0-4. Now, this is where obviously it gets interesting before we talk about where it did last week because the scenarios are in a lot of areas. So you have Whitewright at Nakona and you have Tom Bean at Trenton this week. So the bottom 4, there's people playing each other this week. Tom Bean has the bye, so next week, so we'll know where they stand. But then Trenton plays Whitewright next week, and that could be for a playoff spot. And it could be for a playoff spot regardless of what Whitewright does this week against Nakona. But if you want to be in a very good spot going into your final game with Tom Bean and Trenton playing, and that's a game when we talk about it in a minute. That's 2 teams that have to win that game essentially. But if you're Whitewright, you're playing a team that has really struggled. They have only scored 1 touchdown in the 4 district games. But Nakona is technically still alive because if they somehow win their last 2, they could get to 2-4 and potentially have a chance to be in a tie with somebody. It's a bit of a mess at the bottom of this district. But if you're Whitewright, you've got a chance. Basically, you win this week. You win the next week, the last week against Trenton, you're in, you make the playoffs. If you lose this week, it's not the end of the world, but then the pressure's really, really on for the final week. I think the pressure's on for both weeks anyway, and like I said, I think the winner of White Trenton, that is looking like the winner would be in, or the loser would be out, pending tiebreakers and stuff like that. But if White wins out, they're in, and that's the simplest thing to tell those guys. And obviously, they're gonna have to bounce back after a rough loss, where they put up some good numbers offensively. They averaged 10 yards a carry, ran for 304 yards. Gage Walker 16 carries for 193 yards and 3 touchdowns. Easton Helgen 5 carries for 64 yards and a touchdown as well. The passing game did not really get going in this one. Colt Yancey only 2 of 6 passing for 15 yards, and White only ran 36 plays, but obviously the defense is the concern. You're down 28-0 right away, and you're down 49-14 at halftime. It's one of those things. Like I said, when you look back at it, you may go, well, Wolf City's the best team in the district, and that it doesn't matter if you lose 50-28 or 40-28 or 70-28. Nobody else is beating Wolf City potentially except for Tioga and Alvord, and so you didn't lose any ground at the bottom. Obviously, the question is going to be that after the good start, can White have the confidence to go into these last 2 games that essentially are must-wins, that you can treat them like playoff games, after losing 3 games in a row? Has the doubt started to creep in? And they're very capable of beating Nakona. They're very capable of beating Trenton next week. And if they do that, they're in. And so hopefully they're able to flush the last couple weeks, be able to bounce back. Again, you're going out to Nakona. That's not a fun trip, but it's got to be a business trip. Take care of business, be in position so that no matter what the Trenton Tom Bean outcome is, all you need to know is, hey, if we win the last game, we're going to the playoffs, and it's a place we haven't been for a little bit. So again, it's already one of the better years in recent memory, but you don't want to start the way they started and then end up missing the playoffs. So White got a game at Nakona, 7 o'clock on Friday in 6-2A Division I action. And then the last game in this district, as I talked about, Tom Bean at Trenton, 7 o'clock on Friday. Tom Bean coming off that 49-0 win over Nakona. They are 5-4 overall and 1-4, like I said, in district play. Trenton is coming off the bye. They did not play, so they're sitting at that 4-4 record and 1-3 in district. And this is the season for Tom Bean. If you want to have a shot to make the playoffs, you have to win this game. Much like it was last week, they had to win against Nakona to stay in that mix, and they did. They did it convincingly. Obviously, when you hold somebody to no points, and not just that, but you hold them to under 75 yards total, and you jump up 21-0 in the first quarter, you're on your way. Bobby Rogers, 13 carries, 152 yards, and 3 touchdowns. He also was 6 of 8 passing for 84 yards and 2 touchdowns. Both of those went to Garrett Kelly, who had his 2 catches for 41 yards. McGuire Poole added a 26-yard catch. Reed Sharp, 9 carries for 49 yards and a touchdown. And Kelly also had a 66-yard punt return to finish off the scoring in that one. And again, that's exactly what Tom Bean needed. They've got to win this week to have a chance. Now, if that doesn't guarantee anything, they're going to have to sit and wait to see that Trenton White game the last week. But you're giving yourself a chance, and that's all you can ask. They've had so many close games, so many close losses, unfortunately, in district play. Again, 2 weeks ago, losing by a point to Wolf City, losing on a field goal to Alvord, losing, having a chance to win at the end against White. 3 of their 4 games, have been decided by like a total of 10 points, and they've had a chance. They just haven't been able to convert, but they're still in the mix, and they're going to come out, and they're going to do everything they can to win this game and put the pressure on whoever else, based on the White Wright Trenton game. They need to win, and they need to get in a 3-way tie essentially with White Wright and Trenton to try to get the last spot, have it come down to points. So that not only do they need to win, they need to win big. They need White Wright to lose to Trenton if they win, and then it's got to be by a certain margin. But we'll deal with all that next week. But it's real simple for Tom Bean. And again, since they have the bye, you have a group of seniors that at the very least you want to go out with your best effort. You want to do what, like I said, this may be the last game that you play. And so I think you're gonna see their best effort, and then they're just gonna have to wait and play the waiting game. And it's fortunate that they have to do that, but that's the situation they're in. So they're probably saying we're treating it like it's a playoff game because it is, and it's the last game of the season. You don't want to hold anything back. So I would anticipate a very good showing for Tom Bean, knowing what's at stake, and then like I said, we'll see where the chips fall in 6-2A Division 1 going into that final week next week with Tom Bean watching and waiting and hoping for whatever outcome that they need. The last game we'll talk about, not the last team we'll talk about, but the last game we'll talk about is the game of the week. Again, we've been really lucky this season. There's a lot of games involving teams in our area that have the eyes of the whole state on whatever game it is in that week, and that this may be way up there in terms of the eyeballs and people wanting to see what the result of this is, because you have the Collinsville Pirates hosting Munster 7:00 on Friday in 8-2A Division 2 play. Collinsville is 8-0, 3-0 in district play after they won last week, big as they have been doing in this district, 58-12 against Era. And Munster, they are also undefeated in district at 3-0. They are 6-2 on the season, and they are coming off a 43-7 win over Santo. And this is the game that everybody is watching, because whatever you think about rankings or ratings or whatever, in the Dave Campbell's rankings, you have Collinsville as the number 2 team in the state in 2A Division 2, and Munster is number 3 in the state in 2A Division 2. So you have number 2 versus number 3, and I know you say, well, Munster's got 2 losses, and they do. One of those people remember because they played a local team that was against Pottsboro, which again that's an 8-1 Pottsboro team that's in 3A Division 1, and that was only 32-27. So obviously Munster played well in that one, and then they had a loss against Windthorst, and I'm trying to find that score. That was the week before, I think. I'm sorry, they lost to Holiday. They beat Windthorst. They lost to Holiday 49-35, and that is a team that is ranked in 3A Division 2. So both of their losses are to teams with very good records that have been ranked this season, that are one that is ranked, and outside of that, they've done everything that's lived up to their ranking. And again, Collinsville just keeps winning, and last week no exception. Get up 45-12 at halftime, cruise from there, and again, it's been a very balanced offense. When you look to see the guys that score the touchdowns, everybody's kind of getting involved. And this week, again, no exception to that. Leading the way, throwing the ball, J.J. Jenkins, 17 of 19 for 313 yards and 3 touchdowns. Chad Davidson, 5 catches for 153 yards and 1 touchdown. Peyton Davidson, 2 catches for 68 yards and a touchdown. He also returned an interception, 54 yards for a score. Jackson Spivey, 4 catches for 52 yards and a touchdown. Brandon Cantu, 5 carries, 71 yards and a score. Garrett Trevino, 2 carries, 57 yards, 2 touchdowns. Chase Shepard also scored on the ground. George Light had an interception in the second half as well to go with Davidson. The last 2 touchdowns by Collinsville were interceptions. Lights was for 48 yards. And again, they've jumped up on people. They've done a really good job defensively. That again, holding error to 12 points. Again, the only game that they've really had trouble was against Wolf City, giving up the 42 points. And like I said, this is a huge game. Again, not just for a district championship, not just for in Collinsville's case to stay undefeated. You want to get that top seed. You want to get the best path that you can. And again, if this is one of those games that everybody's going to look at and say, are we looking at the region final in early December? Are we going to see these two again? And does whatever happened in this game play out for what that could be? But obviously, when you have 2 of the top 3 teams facing off against each other, just a monster of a game for 2A Division 2, and to just kind of see just how good these teams are. Last year, Collinsville won 51-27. A lot of people are new. Like we've said on the Collinsville side, it's basically more or less a brand new group on offense. So I don't know if and it's hard in this district because to compare scores. So I don't know what Collinsville hasn't played Santo yet. That's who they finish against, and Munster has Chico, who obviously is not very good. They're 1-7 at the bottom of the district. They haven't won a district game, and so I don't know if you want to look and you say, well, Munster beat Lindsay 44-0, and Collinsville beat Lindsay 55-21. Munster beat Era 64-6, and like we said, Collinsville just beat them 58-12. I mean, this should be a good game. It should be a great game. If it came down to the last play, it wouldn't surprise me. And because that's what happens when really good teams, play each other. Usually the hype is warranted. But so this is obviously said, it's a huge. Both teams have already clinched playoff spots, so that's not a factor. Again, the winner is going to get the top seed for the playoffs. The loser probably going to be the second seed. It depends on who it is. They might have to win their last game, but odds are these are the top 2 teams in the district. They were going into the season, and obviously Collinsville didn't start the season in the rankings. Munster did, but they've obviously shot up the chart based off what they've been able to do this year, and it should be a great game. Munster at Collinsville for the top spot, for sole possession of the top spot in 8-2A Division 2 at 7 p.m. on Friday night. And that's the last game that we have because Texoma Christian is on a bye. But we have to talk about Texoma Christian because like Gunner and Pottsboro and Van Alstyne and Collinsville, who all clinched playoff spots last week, so did Texoma Christian. They won their TAPS Division 3 District 3 game against Greenville Christian, 73-34. So they are 3-0 on the season, 2-0 in district play. Greenville Christian drops to 2-5 overall, 1-1 in district play. And again, another really good offensive performance, pretty good defensive performance too so far in this district. Nate Reed, 12 of 20 passing for 300 yards and 5 touchdowns. Also ran 3 times for 56 yards and returned an interception, 65 for a score. Cade Adley, 6 receptions, 189 yards and 3 touchdowns. Returned an interception, 42 yards for a score. Jake Squires, 10 carries, 206 yards and 2 touchdowns, as well as 2 catches for 46 yards and a touchdown. Brody Stokes, 3 catches, 44 yards and a touchdown. Robert Phillips scored on the ground, and TCS ended up with 572 yards. So their 6-man season is going as well as they could have hoped for the games that they've played. We mentioned they have had a couple games get canceled on them. They were only going to play a limited number because they wanted to be fresh for these games. This was the plan the whole time. If we're going to make the playoffs, we got to get to this part of the season healthy. And they only have 9 guys. So that limits, obviously, what you can do, package wise and personnel wise, and if you get a couple guys hurt, now you're dangerously close to not being able to play because you don't have enough. You don't have enough to put even a 6-man team out there. But they took care of business against Dallas Fairhill. They took care of business against Greenville Christian. So they're going to go to the playoffs, and that's all you could have asked. That's all you would have asked before the season. They have the bye this week. They're going to finish against Longview Heritage Christian next Friday. Longview Heritage and Greenville Christian are playing this week, and that is going to essentially decide a playoff spot. Longview Heritage is undefeated. They're 8-0. They're 1-0. They've only played Fairhill as well. And as if Heritage does what they're expected to do, which is beat Greenville Christian, then you would have the TCS Heritage game be for the district title, first place, and the loser would get the second seed, regardless of who loses, because they would have both beaten Greenville Christian, and then Greenville Christian has to sit and wait and see if they get a wild card as the third seed. But again, it's been a very good showing for TCS. They have played well in all three of their games. You don't want to throw out the win against Rockwell Providence, but again, you beat somebody 50-2, you beat somebody 69-0, and then you beat somebody 73-34. That's as good as you could have asked at this point. I think you would have liked to have seen them play a couple more people just to get some more experience, but they're right where I think they were hoping they would be, that they would beat Fairhill, they would beat Greenville Christian, and they would get into the playoffs. So they're on the bye this week. They're going to see what happens in that other game to determine what they're playing for next week when they make that trip out to Longview Heritage Christian next Friday night. So that's a look at what happened in Week 9. That's a look at what is going to happen with the matchups in Week 10. I hope your team is still in it. I hope your team is already in, and you don't have to worry about it. But we're at that time of year. It's crazy to look and say we're down to the last two regular season football games of the season, and there's a lot of stuff happening. There's a lot of moving parts for a lot of our teams in the area. We always have a great number of teams get in. Obviously, this year's looking like no exception. We're going to have 7 or 8 teams get in like we always do this time of year. So enjoy whatever game you're going to. We thank you for listening to the podcast. Have a great weekend of football, starting early on Thursday with that Sherman game. If you want to watch multiple games this week, you can. And if you want to watch multiple games next week, you can. We'll hit that next week on the podcast. But again, thanks for tuning in. And if you want to catch all the info you need, follow me on Twitter at Jason De La Rosa. Follow me on our social media, on Facebook, the Herald Democrat page, the All-Texomaland page. Do a search for that. That's where you get stuff on late Friday night, all day during the day, Saturday. If you want to know about the volleyball playoffs that are about to start coming up after this week, we'll have all the volleyball stuff on there. State cross country is this week. We've got several schools with people down there. So, and basketball is about to start. There's a lot going on, and you can find out all the info, whether it's at our website, heralddemocrat.com, or if you want to see the posts when you're scrolling through Facebook, follow the Herald Democrat, follow All-Texomaland, and you'll get all that stuff in your feed, and you can keep up with that as well. So again, thanks for listening to the podcast.